Our scripture today is from the Gospel of Luke. So they bided their time by sending spies who pretended to be righteous in order to entrap Jesus by something he said. Then they would turn him over to the power and authority of the governor. So the spies asked him, "Rabbi, we know what you teach and say is right. You show no partiality. You teach the way of God truthfully. Is it proper for us to pay tribute to Caesar or not?" Jesus saw through their deceitfulness and said, "Show me a denarius. Whose picture and name are on it?" They said, "Caesar's." He said, "Then give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Give to God what is God's." They were unable to find fault with any of his public statements, and they were so in awe of his answer that they fell silent. Ancient words for consideration today.
Well, you know, I don't like to get political. But the truth is, politics is how we treat each other. In a church that serves in oppressive systems of power and remains silent is renouncing our lesson today. Jesus did not come for the powerful, the popular. He said he was going to build a new temple based on stones the builders rejected. There's nothing more central to the Jewish and Christian messages than not mistreating immigrants. Nothing. That was the foundation of the covenant. That was the condition. That was the footnote. You were a slave. I'm going to free you. But do not oppress the stranger. Love the neighbor as yourself. Treat the immigrant as a citizen, which has just become illegal. And this church, like many other churches around the country, is going to have to decide how Christian we want to be. How much of our allegiance goes to Jesus Christ and how much of it goes to Caesar. To understand our text, though, see, the church talks about justice issues from 2,000 years ago. So anybody can reject Caesar, but who's sitting in that chair today? Like that's how you bring the word into your current day, to try to understand it. Now, churches like ours that believe in sanctuary for undocumented people can be invaded by the government. There's another church in Austin that is suffering abuse from the state for ministering to the homeless, with the argument that they're bringing criminals into the neighborhood. There have always been two types of Christianity. One are all of the creeds and rules about Jesus, and the other is what Jesus actually said. And what Jesus actually said is forbidden in most pulpits in the country. It's contextualized within the theology that Jesus never signed off on, and a moralism that he would find repugnant. When the president declared that there are only two genders, it kind of reminded me of the Pope that forbade eclipses. That's a scientific question. That's a biological question. The former president of Trump University has no business. In fact, his charter is to take those kinds of decisions out of politicians' hands. That's going to be kind of an interesting wormhole to squeeze through. More than 12, as I understand it, investigative what do you call it, IGs? Inspector General. I was tripping up on that first word. That checked the government for abuse and fraud were fired. 1,500 people who assaulted the Capitol, many of them violently, have been pardoned. Steve Bannon said that what was happening, let me go ahead and just read his words. I certainly don't want to misquote. He said, "This is the beachhead team taking over the federal government." Now, how is a Christian to respond? What is our relationship to Caesar? And also importantly, how are you going to keep your peace of mind, your joy intact in these next years? We're looking at a story that seems almost irrelevant, and it's kind of used to dismiss a lot of the questions we're going to look at today. Jesus is already in trouble. Remember, the cross was not a theological symbol, it was a political symbol of Rome, the Roman Empire. That's what you did to peasants who rose up. Jesus' threat was not theological. The Romans could care less about theology. He represented a type of love that rises in resistance to injustice. Not violently, but in a way that terrifies dictators. It always has. So the priests, the religious figures who've sold out to Rome, go up to Jesus and they say to him, "Is it okay to pay tax to Caesar?" Now, to the American mind, it looks like Jesus is going to dodge the whole question. He asks to see a coin. He looks at the coin and he says, "Whose face is on this coin?" The religious leader has no choice but to say Caesar. So Jesus says, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God." Now, to a Roman mind, probably to an American mind, that sounds like it's saying just divide the two up, pay your taxes, do your duty to your country, kill people when your country tells you to, exploit your workers if that's what makes the economy strong, and reserve religion to thoughts and prayers. Right? Do prayers for the people who died because of your policies. And humble prayers say, "God, we've sold out to the gun industry, but please protect our children. Don't let our evil bear the seeds that are inevitable." Now, I want to suggest that what Jesus is actually giving us is a very important recipe for getting through these years. And they should have been our recipe all along, because there are a lot of people in this country who've never seen the light of day. And a lot of people who look like me were fine with it. Now we know how it feels, right? To think that half of this country does not own their own body, does not have constitutional rights. The most basic constitutional right is you belong to yourself. Whatever you think about abortion is a secondary issue. Does a woman belong to herself? Not in this country. I think it's really interesting in the Trump Bible, hallowed be its name, they have, they put the religious stuff in there, Lee Greenwood, is that the guy's name? Like one of his patriotic songs. They have some patriotic stuff in there, and they have the Constitution without the amendments. So when we talk about being a constitutional originalist, when we talk about getting back and making America great again, what they've always meant is back before civil rights, back before their protections that the church will not take over the state, protections for illegal search and seizure. We can't help but be political. If there are two people in the room, they're politics. And the question is whether they are just or unjust. As a church, we will need to decide how Christian we want to be. Jesus said the way through this, if I'm hearing him right, is first of all to remember who you are. In the little story that we heard, a Jewish person and a Roman person would hear it very differently. The Roman heard it like probably you and I do. Just divide stuff up. But a Jewish person would say, okay, if the coin has the image of Caesar on it, then what has the image of God? Where is the image of God? If I'm supposed to give to God what is God, where do I find that? And then you say, oh yeah, that's me. Jesus said you are the light of the world. When you look down the road and you don't see any light coming, that is your cue to turn on. Because the reason human rights exist at all is people who did not turn off their light when everyone else did. Everybody who worked in the cold weather shelter gets clemency, gets pardons. It was brutal. This was a brutal time. So, to say you are the image of God, particularly let's say you don't believe in God, what it means is you're a child of the universe. Whoever you are, you carry the creative principles that brings everything into being. That's who you are, most essentially. More so than your social personality. You are a light shining out of the darkness of the cosmos. There's no reason to turn our lights off when it gets dark culturally, when it gets dark politically. We celebrate Martin Luther King every year. What do you think his advice would be? Let's hide. Let's circle the wagons. Let's keep it safe. Now, if you have children, of course, you have a responsibility to them first. But if ICE does show up, we're not asking anybody to take a risk, but some of us are going to need to. And we'll have to self-identify for that. For families with transgender children, somebody needs to be the friend. To women who find themselves pregnant, and a politician has come between them and their doctor. Again, the contradictions are very stark. Can the church return to the image of God, which is the human face in the Jewish culture? Being able to see the sacred in other human beings is central. we had a beautiful Christmas season. And we looked at the symbolism where Jesus was born of the stars. And it's really talking about us as human beings. We are children of the stars. And the question now is, can you bring that into the darkness? It's easy to believe those things when the light is on. But what the world needs from us now, what our human family needs from us right now, is for us to learn to turn that light on in the dark, to turn the joy on in the dark, to turn the peace on in the dark. The early church had one of my favorite little creeds. This was before they had the formal creeds. But it said, the greatest glory that can be given to God is a human being fully alive. To know who you are is to resolve that during this time, you will not let anything rob you of your full humanity. You will love with all of your mind, even if they tell you that it's crazy. You'll love with all of your heart, even if they say it's immoral. Heart, mind, to live, and all of your strength. You see, here in the death throes of capitalism, you're no longer a citizen, you're a consumer. Your value to this new America run like a business is no longer to be involved civilly, but to buy patriotic stuff. Just garish trash. I'm not putting down the Trump Bible or the golden tennis shoes or but resolve to be fully alive during this time. And second, it says to render unto Caesar. Now, I think what that means is to remember that human beings are the image of God, but no system is. No matter how much you love it, no country is, no church, no synagogue, no economic system. That what we're looking for is the image of God, and so we have to renounce the hold that Caesar has in our hearts. We have to stop believing that property gives value. Not before we see the value of nature and of human beings. We have to stop thinking that everything our nation does is okay because we're Americans. Anybody who believes that has never read the Bible. And I know that shocks you with our president. But that was the prophetic warning all along. If you think you're going to get special privileges because you were born on this side of the border and not on that side of the border, let me ask you this. If you had been born on the other side of the border, what would you want from us as human beings? Jesus said, whose name is on the coin? And I think today he would say, whose name is signed on the Trump Bible? Putting your name on the Bible as though you own it, as though you're producing it, you're bringing it to people. And it's an old, fourth-rate copy of the King James Version. It really hurts me, the guitar. Taking a cheap guitar and selling it as a classic Les Paul. The symbols of power belong to those systems of oppression. You were called out of those systems of oppression. I've said it before, the word church means called out. If we participate in abuse against our human family, through the nation, through the church, we're just as guilty as if we'd done it as individuals. So, on this planet, it's like you're born on a roulette wheel, and you can't control your fate. But what you can control is your character. And when you make that your heart's treasure, you transform the human condition, because you're no longer determined by what happens to you. You have a treasure in your heart that Caesar can't get to. Caesar wouldn't know it if he saw it. So let go of all of those things that a bully can control. Talking about in your heart. We can't do this externally completely, but in your heart, build an inner sanctum that's outside of the control of the systems of domination. A place where you can always go to find peace and joy. That depression that you may be feeling does not belong to you as the light of the world. That's not who you are. That belongs to Caesar too. Give that back. Now, the last thing is Jesus says, render unto God what belongs to God. Jesus said to make it on earth as it is in heaven. And the church reversed that and said, you can let the earth go to hell, just get chosen individuals and they get to go to heaven. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus' form of Christianity is dangerous. And I don't blame anybody for saying, I don't want to do that. But we need to stop people from speaking in Jesus' name, from lying in Jesus' name, and saying that Jesus talked about abortion or homosexuality. Somebody needs to say, please stop lying in God's name. Jesus never heard of America, didn't know what a gun was. That doesn't make those things wrong, but they're not essential. And that's what we're looking for right now. Jesus taught a way of loving resistance. And that's what a church of Jesus Christ is. On behalf of the poor, the weak. Not because it hates the oppressor. We're all one family. But when you're an abusive family, the best thing you can do for everybody is stop the abuse. I ran across an interesting quote this week. Seems like this is going a long time. Sorry about that. This is from Diane Langberg. I think you'll like it. We are God's dissidents every time we respond in offices, in communities, in churches, in schools, and in any areas of abuse. We do this as parts of systems, many of them with good and godly aims. We must not go to sleep. We must watch. We must not assume that our family, our church, community, country, organization is always right, just because the people in it use the right words. We must never agree to protect the name of God by covering ungodliness. Understand that you cannot single-handedly change an entire system. You are not called to do so. Yet we are to speak truth about our systems. This is difficult to do and sometimes quite risky. Just ask Martin Luther King. Or ask Martin Luther himself. Ask those in the Me Too movement. When systems change, it is often little by little, and usually at great cost. This is the part I wanted you to hear. When you feel overwhelmed, remember this. People are sacred, created in the image of God. Systems are not. And people are to be treated, whether one or many, the way Jesus Christ treated people. Heaven on earth isn't going to start from the outside in. It starts in our own hearts. And you don't have to be religious at all. You don't have to be Christian. To set aside a place in your heart where love and joy and peace will not be at risk in this world. To stop being triggered by what other people do. So I know this is a very discouraging time for many people, and I know that many of you are in harm's way because of the changes that are taking place. My hope is that this church will declare itself to be your best friend, that this church will declare itself to be your ally, even if you're attacked. It's one thing to be inclusive. It's something else to come between the abuser and the abused. We've done some courageous things in the past. We're about to hit the big time. This is what Christianity was born for. And I feel in many ways this is what we were born for. To show human greatness in dire times. You do it by remembering who you are. You're not restricted to this particular cultural context. You are a light shining out of the very heart of the universe. Don't let anything dim that light. And second, you can always throw away those thoughts that are hurting you. Render unto Caesar the brutal hatred, name calling. You don't need that abuse in your inner sanctum. And then finally, render unto God what belongs to God, which means to be who you truly are, and to love with all of your heart, mind, and strength. So you have one assignment through this dark time, and that is to let your light shine. I'll leave you now to your own reflections on these words.